Robin Williams was born on July 21, 1951, in Chicago. He came into a world that would soon be transformed by the cultural revolutions of the 1960s. America was in a state of social and political flux. Traditional norms were beginning to crumble, paving the way for new forms of artistic and personal expression. Television was exploding in popularity, and stand-up comedy clubs were humming with fresh voices. This fertile ground of experimentation played a crucial role in shaping a young Robin's worldview. He was an only child for many of his formative years, growing up in relative isolation in a big house in suburban Detroit. Once his family moved from Chicago. His father worked as a senior executive at Ford Motor Company, which meant he was often away, busy with meetings and travel. His mother was a former model, elegant and charming in her manner. Though financially comfortable, Robin often described loneliness as his earliest companion. With no siblings to conspire with, and with parents who weren't always present, he had to construct entire imaginative worlds to keep himself company. Early on, he discovered that making people laugh could be a key, one that unlocked instant acceptance, friendship, and warmth. Even as a little boy, Robin reportedly entertained himself by creating voices for his stuffed animals, orchestrating entire comedic routines in his bedroom. He was also known for mimicking the voices of relatives, teachers, and even neighbors with impressive accuracy. Perhaps in those days, it was a search for attention or a yearning to connect in a house that echoed with too much quiet. Either way, his comedic instincts were unstoppable. As a teenager, Robin's family relocated yet again, this time to the San Francisco Bay Area. By the late 1960s, San Francisco was more than just a city. It was an epicenter of cultural upheaval, brimming with the spirit of protest, experimentation, and free love. Artists, poets, and musicians flooded its streets, searching for new forms of expression. It was there, in this swirling, evolving environment, that Robin began to discover the power of spontaneity and irreverence. He would watch street performers, soak up their improvisational flair, and see how they captured attention by subverting expectations. This freewheeling atmosphere started to shape him into a performer who was unafraid to take risks, verbally cartwheeling through jokes and stories. Even so, Robin's early path was not a direct leap into stand-up comedy. He was academically bright but found conventional schooling dull. After briefly flirting with political science in college, he recognized that laughter and performance were his real passions. Against all odds and parental caution, he auditioned for and was accepted into the esteemed Juilliard School in New York, one of the nation's top conservatories for the performing arts. There, he studied drama alongside Christopher Reeve and other budding luminaries. He worked under legendary instructors who recognized Robin's extraordinary gift. They saw that beneath his rapid-fire comedic genius lay the heart of a serious actor, someone who understood the importance of every gesture, pause, and pitch in bringing characters to life. While others at Juilliard excelled at classical theater in a more disciplined, contained way, Robin stood out as a chaotic burst of unscripted brilliance. Teachers would sometimes struggle to rein him in. He would take a single line or prompt and spin it into an elaborate comedic tapestry, peppering the stage with so many improvised comedic asides that scene partners had to fight to keep up. When Robin left Juilliard, he spent some time working in stand-up comedy clubs, particularly in Los Angeles and San Francisco. The mid-1970s were a golden era for stand-up, with the entire country hungry for raw, more direct comedic voices. The comedy club circuit was akin to a traveling carnival of up-and-comers and established legends. Robin's style, fueled by physical antics, a kaleidoscope of voices, and on-the-spot improvisation made him an almost overnight sensation in these clubs. Audiences were simply unprepared for that level of comedic mania. Word spread fast about a frizzy-haired comic in t-shirts and jeans who would sweat profusely on stage from the sheer energy of his performance, bouncing off walls, spontaneously interacting with audience members, even jumping atop tables to deliver a punchline from a new vantage point. He was unstoppable. His big break came in the late 1970s when producers cast him as Mork, an alien from the planet Ork, in a cameo appearance on the sitcom Happy Days. He stole every scene he was in, turning a brief guest spot into an unforgettable phenomenon. The response was so electric that ABC executives immediately commissioned a spin-off sitcom, Mork and Mindy, which premiered in 1978. Robin soared to fame practically overnight, introducing the iconic greeting, na nu, and unleashing comedic improvisation never before seen on primetime television. The show was a hit, catapulting Robin into the living rooms of millions of Americans each week. Here was this wide-eyed alien in rainbow suspenders, delivering lines at warp speed while exuding a sweet, childlike innocence. Though it was a family-friendly sitcom, behind the scenes, Robin was reveling in the fast-paced, hedonistic lifestyle of a newly minted star. He soared on adrenaline, rarely letting himself stop or rest. During these transformative years, one rarely discussed aspect is just how thoroughly Robin immersed himself in the Hollywood party scene. He had come from a relatively structured upbringing. Suddenly, he had mountains of money, fame, and no real rules. Cocaine and alcohol became his confidants. In the stand-up world of the late 1970s and early 1980s, substance use was rampant, often romanticized as an inherent part of the comedic and artistic life. Robin once joked that cocaine was God's way of telling you you're making too much money. But behind that trademark laugh lurked real pain. People close to him say that, while he was unstoppable on stage, he could be withdrawn and lost in private. He sought comfort in a glass or a line, chasing a high that might quiet his overactive mind. Although his comedic performance was consistently brilliant, his personal relationships started to strain under the weight of his addictions and relentless schedule. In 1982, tragedy struck. Robin's friend and comedic peer, John Belushi, died of a drug overdose. The news rattled Robin to his core. He had partied with Belushi shortly before the fateful overdose. That event served as a cold, stark wake-up call, prompting Robin to try to get clean. In the aftermath, he confessed his terror at witnessing Belushi's self-destruction. Perhaps he saw the reflection of his own downward spiral. He realized that he might not survive if he continued on the same destructive path. So with the encouragement of close friends and family, Robin attempted to put drugs behind him. It was a difficult process, but for a significant stretch of the 1980s, he managed to curb his addictions. This was a period of renewed focus and, coincidentally or not, a period of substantial professional growth. By the mid to late 1980s, Robin was an established box office draw. He embarked on a series of film roles that allowed him to showcase his versatility beyond mere comedic frenzy. Movies like Good Morning Vietnam, 1987, offered a perfect showcase for his improvisational comedic style. There's a famous sequence where his radio DJ character ad-libs bits and voices, reminiscent of Robin's stand-up brilliance, but also revealed a depth of emotion as he grappled with war and its moral complexities. This pattern continued with the critically acclaimed Dead Poets Society, 1989, in which Robin played English teacher John Keating, inspiring students to seize the day and find their voices through poetry and critical thinking. That role cemented his reputation as more than just a funny man. He was a credible dramatic actor capable of touching hearts and eliciting tears. He didn't abandon comedy, however. In Aladdin, 1992, as the voice of the genie, he blended his comedic gift with a childlike glee that resonated across generations. This animated character was so full of life and spontaneity that fans have called it one of the greatest voice performances in the history of animation. A lesser-known story from around this time involves Robin's visit to a children's hospital shortly after Aladdin was released. According to a pediatric nurse who was present, he spontaneously slipped into the genie's voice when he spotted a child who was in pain and fear. He performed a mini stand-up routine, improvising lines as the genie for nearly 10 minutes, bringing contagious laughter to a ward that had felt dreary and lifeless. The child's eyes lit up, and even staff members paused to watch what felt like a one-of-a-kind performance. This was the essence of Robin Williams, a man who could conjure magic on the spot, even in a hospital corridor. He considered it a calling, comedy as a salve for suffering. Yet the question that lingers is, how often did he find that salve for his own suffering? Throughout the 1990s, Robin's star soared. Mrs. Doubtfire, 1993, was both hilarious and surprisingly tender, featuring him as a father so desperate to spend time with his children, after a divorce that he masquerades as an elderly British nanny. Audiences laughed at his physical hijinks, falling face first into a cake and emerging with frosting all over his face in one memorable scene, yet also empathized with his heartbreak. Again, it was the interplay of comedic mania and heartfelt sincerity that made the role iconic. Next came Jumanji, 1995, The Birdcage, 1996, and a host of other films that capitalized on his ability to shift between comedic bursts and poignant drama. The crowning glory, at least by Hollywood's measure, came in 1997 with Good Will Hunting. He played Dr. Sean Maguire, a psychologist who helps a troubled genius confront his past. Robin's performance won him an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and for many fans, that acceptance speech was a triumph of humility and gratitude. At the podium, he spoke of how comedy had saved him, how it was a way to connect with people. Many believed that at this pinnacle, Robin might have finally found contentment. Yet he would later admit that during that time, the internal battles never truly ceased. Success could be as terrifying as obscurity because it stoked new fears. The fear of losing it all, the fear of not living up to impossible expectations. What wasn't widely known was that Robin's depression would ebb and flow like a stealth tide. Sometimes it barely lapped at the edges of his life. Other times it swelled into a tsunami of despair. He was diagnosed with depression and had struggled with anxiety since he was young, but he concealed these struggles behind a mask of humor. Friends described a man who lit up every room he entered with unstoppable jokes, yet often seemed subdued and distant once the laughter died down. His personal life was punctuated by divorces and complicated relationships. He fathered 3 children, and by all accounts loved them dearly. But balancing the demands of fatherhood with the intense pace of Hollywood work and an ever-present tension in his private world took its toll. According to people close to him, his greatest fear was that his audience would discover the real him, someone not constantly brimming with comedic brilliance, but often empty and frightened. By the early 2000s, he experienced a relapse into alcoholism. Despite years of sobriety, the pressures of sustaining his career and personal life must have proven overwhelming. In interviews, Robin admitted that he had fallen back on old habits, once again wrestling with the bottle. He made a brave choice to check himself into rehab around 2006. After emerging, He seemed rejuvenated, even poking fun at his own stints in rehab during stand-up sets. He would exclaim that rehab was like going to Hotel California, referencing the classic Eagles track. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. But the undercurrent of loneliness and dissatisfaction still lingered. During his later years, Robin explored roles that were sometimes smaller or more introspective. He continued to do stand-up tours, delighting fans around the world with his rapid-fire theatrical humor. But in between gigs, he felt the rumblings of an internal storm. Some close friends noticed that even his mania on stage seemed tinged with desperation, as though he were trying to outrun shadows that kept catching up. He joked more about aging, about mortality, and about being left behind in an industry that constantly pivots to the next big star. Then came the year 2014. That summer, Robin's health took a dramatic downward turn. He began experiencing severe insomnia, tremors in his hands, and moments of terrifying anxiety. His memory started to fail him. Imagine a man who had built his life on lightning-fast improvisation, suddenly unable to recall lines from a script or even brief notes for a scene. This was more than just an aging performer's memory lapses. He became paranoid, worried that he might be losing his mind. Doctors initially diagnosed him with Parkinson's disease, a neurological disorder known for causing tremors and mobility issues. Parkinson's alone would be devastating for someone whose entire identity rested on physical expressiveness and comedic spontaneity. But the truth was even grimmer. Robin had a rare condition called Lewy body dementia, a brutal and little understood disorder that tears apart cognition, triggers hallucinations, and gradually erodes the ability to control one's behaviors and thoughts. At first, the diagnosis was murky. He and his wife, Susan Schneider Williams, scrambled from one medical appointment to another, desperate for answers. He felt his life unraveling day by day. No longer could he read scripts comfortably, nor could he memorize lines. His confidence, the bedrock of his comedic genius, evaporated. It seemed that the very engine of his mind, once so unstoppable, was faltering, choking on confusion and fear. This triggered deeper depression, overshadowing every waking moment. Close friends tried to lift his spirits, reminding him that he was beloved, that he was Robin Williams, one of the world's greatest entertainers. But all these affirmations likely felt hollow when stacked against the nightmare of losing his own thoughts, losing the comedic spark that had defined him for so long. For a man as empathic and introspective as Robin, the creeping mental disintegration must have been terrifying. By August 2014, the situation had become dire. Robin's family noted that he was often disoriented, unable to sleep, and consumed by anxiety that verged on panic. He experienced bouts of paranoia and hallucinations, which grew increasingly vivid. The unstoppable comedic whirlwind that once lit up stages around the world was unraveling before his loved one's eyes. He withdrew further, terrified and tormented by an internal storm no one could quiet. On August 11th, 2014, Robin Williams took his own life. He was 63 years old. News of his death rocketed around the globe, leaving fans and colleagues stunned. The man who had so often lifted our spirits was suddenly gone, felled by a disease most of us knew little about, and by the anguish of a mental battle that he believed he could no longer win. In the aftermath, an autopsy revealed the severity of his Lewy body dementia. According to later accounts, doctors expressed shock at how advanced it was, describing his brain as nearly ravaged by the disease. It was not merely depression or Parkinson's. It was a ferocious storm in his mind that would have undermined anyone's sense of self. The revelation sparked global discussions about dementia, mental health, and the invisible battles that many people face. Robin's wife, Susan, devoted significant efforts to raising awareness about Lewy body dementia, hoping that her husband's tragic end might at least pave the way for greater understanding and earlier interventions for others. For many who admired Robin, the painful reality was that he had long lived with a certain darkness. If we revisit interviews and comedic bits, we might find glimpses of it. Jokes about mental turmoil, fleeting comments about emptiness, stories from colleagues who watched him light up a stage, only to sit alone afterwards in profound melancholy. The new dimension that emerged after his passing was the monstrous revelation that his mind had physically betrayed him. In hindsight, his final months appear as a race against a disease that was devouring him from the inside. Perhaps the humor and joy he tried to spread was his last stand against this silent attacker. Another lingering aspect of Robin's story is the cultural conversation it provoked about comedic genius and pain. There's a long-standing stereotype that the funniest people often harbor the darkest secrets. In Robin Williams' case, it feels particularly true. He was known to shine a spotlight on everyone else's happiness, even as he was haunted by internal shadows. For those who encountered him in everyday life, fans who saw him perform at a small club, or neighbors who ran into him in the grocery store, there was a sense of childlike wonder that accompanied him. People described feeling that he genuinely cared, that he was never too grand to make a silly face or share a quick joke with a stranger. His comedic gifts were not simply a performance technique. They were tools he used to connect with the human family, one spontaneous laugh at a time. But as big-hearted as he was, the man behind the stage persona struggled to forgive himself for perceived failures, failed relationships, perceived inadequacies, or times when he felt he had let others down. While the public mostly saw a comedic whirlwind, those closest to him saw someone who carried an enormous burden of self-doubt. Some of his personal relationships frayed amid the unpredictability of his moods and the changes in his behavior from substance abuse or mental distress. At times, he pushed people away to avoid burdening them with his internal chaos, and yet, ironically, so many of those same people were deeply grateful for the moments he was present, reminding them that beyond the mania there was a gentle, introspective man who loved unconditionally. If there is a lasting significance to Robin Williams' story, it lies in the collision of staggering talent and harrowing vulnerability. We saw a person who gave the world so much joy, but was unable to halt the destructive forces within his own brain. His death remains an emotional shockwave, resonating with anyone who knows or suspects the agony of mental illness. He humanized the struggle, reminded us that no matter how brilliant or charismatic a person might be, nobody is immune to the complexities of the human condition. Indeed, if there's one main takeaway, it might be this: true empathy requires us to look beyond the laughter, beyond the public persona, and into the quiet places where real battles are fought. And that wraps up today's video. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like, leave a comment with your feedback, and subscribe to stay updated on upcoming videos. Appreciate you watching.